Okay, so this guide is about two things. It's about the ideal meeting and it's about lobby crafting slash lobby synergy. So we'll start with the ideal meeting first. So just a basic ideal meeting would be like this, right? So bodies reported, you give timing and location in the first like 5 to 10 seconds, and then immediately after that, different players are pushing clears off of their info. So like office clears, O2 clears, specimen clears, that kind of thing, right? And then simultaneously, admin info is given, and like you're clearing simultaneously, right? Like so they give admin info, like, 202, 2 space, whatever, whatever. And then you say, I'm clearing this person, we're in O2, I'm clearing this person, we're in space, right? And then usually you'll be able to narrow it down in the first half of the meeting to like 3 players, right? And then right after that, you want to get their locations, preferably backed up by admin info, and then their pathing. And then you want to interrogate them, so ask them like a couple questions, and then you want to have a coordinated shot or skip, preferably on the imp, right? If it's between more than 3 people, then you're probably playing poorly in terms of positioning, and you probably should skip, right? So that's the ideal meeting. You narrow it down to 3 people, you interrogate them, and then you shoot the imp in that manner, right? So let's talk about round one meetings. So the round one meeting dictates every single game. You can usually tell if a game is going to be an easy win or if it's going to be like a chaotic, potentially lost game off of the round one meeting. Usually the imposters, basically, if a round one meeting is poor, it's usually in the imposter's hands to lose at that point, right? So that's one thing. So the round one meeting is obviously the most important, and you should always play for round one. Uh, so how you have a good round one meeting is obviously, right, you want it to be clear, you don't want it to be clogged. But what this means is that some people have to lead and others have to take the back seat, right? We play with 10 players. Obviously, not all 10 can talk at once, otherwise it's just going to be clogged. But obviously, everyone or most people need to give info to deduce the imp, right? Because if you only have one perspective, you can't really solve. So it's a balancing act, right? Like some people have to take the back seat and have to listen, and some people have to lead. So essentially, this means that in the meeting, crewmates play a different role, and we'll get to these roles, but you just have to figure out what your role is in a particular game and maximize your role. There's different ways to maximize these roles. So I've decided on there being 3 roles for this guide. So there's carry, there's mid, and there's AI. So I'll just briefly explain them and then I'll go into more depth. So carry is like the good players of the lobby, the ones who usually get target killed, are the ones who usually vote right? The mid players are, the middle players of the lobby. The ones with a good understanding of the meta. They've been playing for a while, but they're just not quite as good as the carries. They're sometimes wrong, but they still have a good understanding. They could still gather info, and they have a meeting presence, right? And then the AIs, they're just the ones who speed on tasks. They're like the new ranked players or the old ranked players that they don't play meetings very well for one reason or another, and maybe they have poor memory, so they just speed on tasks, and that's their playstyle. It doesn't mean they're bad, but that's just their playstyle, right? So I'm going to talk about each of these roles, and then I'm going to talk about how to maximize them, right? So back to the carry. So the carry, so they give info and clears consistently. So they run around, they gather info, they clear players consistently, or they listen to the meeting and piece together other people's information, right? They usually take one of these roles. So that either they're leading the meeting or they're taking the back seat and piecing together the info. Preferably they do both. They don't initiate chaos or throws. So essentially what I mean by this chaos or throws is like how games tend to be lost. It's not usually everyone's playing perfectly and then one person throws and then the game's lost. What usually happens is that someone makes a minor misplay and then someone else misplays off that, and then someone misplays off that, and then you have a chaotic game, and it leads to a throw, right? So people would think these throws happen on 6, where like, you know, you shoot the crewmate on crit, for example, but really their throws happen much early, usually in round 1, because if a round 1 is played well, then you'll never even get to the point of 6, right? You'll usually have shot an imp by 6 if you're playing well. So yeah, so the carry doesn't initiate throws and chaos. Usually it's the mid players. But so the carry, they have strong meeting presence. People usually sheep them. They, you know, they listen to them and everything. But this can make them a bad imp, right? Because if people sheep you, they're usually going to 50-50 you, right? If you shoot a crewmate or if you shoot 2 crewmates, then you're probably getting shot. And if you live, you know, you're probably getting shot. So the carry has a really good game understanding, especially a meta understanding. They carry meta clears bad crewmates. So if a kill is like between 4 people and it's obviously very well placed, then the carry like can make a read on if the bad crew is because the AIs they tend to have tells like you know they're usually bad imps, so you could clear them for good imp plays, right? And the carry tends to meta clear pairs as well. So some pairs are just obviously not possible, and the carry will tend to meta clear pairs. And the carry also meta susses good players playing poorly. So if someone else who's really good in the lobby, if they're obviously playing poorly, they're just not speaking or they're just saying the wrong things, then they will tend to be able to read them, even if it's not like mechanical, right? The carry detects how the game is playing out. So they could detect if a crew is going to get shot round 1 meeting, or if the meeting's getting chaotic, or if there's a misclear, these kinds of things, right? Carry pushes a shot out on the imposter, or skips if the crewmate's getting voted. Okay, so this is the kind of player that I'm referring to when I talk about a carry. Obviously, you can have some games where you play like this, or some games where you don't. This isn't like you can't really put players in this category permanently. Like some players have really good games and play like this. Some players who are good consistently, they have games where they don't play like this, right? So this is just a category. Okay, now let's talk about the mid player. So the mid player, they listen and they give info, right? They're able to play info, like office and cabs and stuff, and they're able to give clears. They get able to give accurate clears, so you could trust their clears usually. They usually have a meeting presence, so if they speak, people will hear them, right? Like they have a microphone and stuff and they use it. But they're also usually a good imp, right? Because they can like take a bit of a backseat sometimes and go under the radar, right? They can usually be very good imps. A mid player makes mistakes, and a mid player shouldn't call a shot round 1, especially when there's better players in the lobby. Unless they have incriminating evidence, obviously. Like if you have incriminating evidence, which means, you know, you catch the imposter in a lie, then obviously push a vote. But if you only have it between 3 or 4 people and you're a mid player, you should not push a vote because there's better players in the lobby and they might have a better perspective than you, right? So you should let them play the game in round 1 because they're probably going to get killed next round, right? Like you'll probably live till crit if you're a mid player. You're probably not going to get target killed, right? So yeah, so you shouldn't push a vote round 1. Oh yeah, and the mid player usually initiates chaos and throws. So usually the mid player is the one that initiates the misplays and the throws because the AI tier, they don't really play the game that much, and the carries are usually like very good, so they don't really make misplays that initiate throws. So usually it will be the mid player, like maybe they clog, maybe they mishear someone, maybe they're just playing out of the position, etc., etc. Maybe they misclear, etc., etc. Or give like wrong info or something. Or maybe they just push crewmates, like that kind of thing, right? So you can maximize the mid roll by playing actively but not clogging. So So play actively, plays you usually play, like give clears, gather info, but do not clog excessively, and do not try and lead the meeting. If you try and lead the meeting, you're just gonna cause a loss, right? Because there's better players who could do it better than you, and they might have a better perspective, right? And you gather more info by listening anyways. Like you shouldn't be actively leading the meeting if you're this kind of player, right? It's just not good because you'll make mistakes, like guaranteed. Okay, so that's the mid player. So AI. So AI tier. Um, the reason I called it AI is because they tend to just run around and speedrun tasks like an AI, right? It doesn't mean they're bad necessarily. It just means they play a more passive role in the game and they usually get carried. Um, and they usually don't speak that much in meetings and they usually don't gather info, right? So the AI, they don't gather reliable info. Potentially they have like poor memory, or maybe they're just a task speedrunner. For whatever reason, they don't gather much info. They don't really clear people unless they're in their vision. They won't go out of their way to clear someone. The AI player generally speedruns tasks, right? And they only play Office when they've finished tasks or close to finishing tasks. The AI player generally has a weak meeting presence. So when they speak, they get talked over, slash, they don't talk in general. And the role of an AI player is to throw as imp or to die as a crewmate. That is their role. They're basically the fodder of the lobby, right? The AI player is easily readable as crew, and the AI player is usually a bad imposter because they don't have a good understanding of the game, slash they play it passively and not actively, right? And they don't have a meeting presence, right? The way to maximize the AI role, if you fall into this category, is to listen. Like that's your main skill set. Listen and detect who the good crew are voting, right? So if you're an AI, generally you want to sheep like round one, and you do this by listening and detect who the good crew are voting, right? So that's how you maximize your role as an AI player. Again, it doesn't mean you're bad. This is just a play style, right? Like I said at the beginning, not everyone can lead. Some people need to take a back seat. This is just so the meeting does not get clogged, right? Okay, so I've explained some of the roles and the characteristics of the roles. Now I'm going to explain the ideal lobby and why I think it is this way, right? So the ideal lobby, it has to have a balance of people actively playing and a balance of people playing passively slash, being bad imps, right? So generally, you want 2 to 3 carries in a lobby, and their role is to listen to the info, give info, and piece it together, and then push an early vote, preferably on the imposter, right? So their role is to solve. You want 4 AI players generally, so they could get cleared as crew and shot as imposter, right? So they'll get cleared as crew because they're easy to read, and they'll get shot as imposter because they usually sell as imps, right? And they don't have a meeting presence, so they generally don't make plays, right? And the remaining players should be mid, and they're there to give clears, to gather info, and to win the late game, right? So they're good players. Like they could figure it out if they're left alive, but generally they want to take a back seat in the meeting one, and they want to do this by giving info, and then they want to play for the late game, right? And in my opinion, I think this is a optimal split. So enough people playing passively and enough people playing actively, so you could have a very fluid meeting without too much clogging and speaking. And yeah, so that's basically it.